Hello, I'm State Representative Janine Nodder, and this is Chatting with Janine. The year 2020 is almost here, and that means it's primary season once again, and political junkies like me get very excited when it's primary season. So it's that time of the year again to have the candidates come on the show so you can meet them too. So today we're going to meet Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who's an American hero. During his 36-year career with the U.S. Army, he received 2 awards for valor, 5 Bronze Star medals, and 2 Purple Hearts. He has been awarded the Defense Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device, and numerous awards from our allies. So I'm very excited to chat with him, and I hope you are too. So welcome, General Bolduc. Can I call you Bolduc?
Yes, you can. Yes. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and thank you. And before we get started, I just want to make sure that that I thank you for your long-standing service to our state and all the great things that you do for our state. So God bless you, and thank you for that.
Thank you. You know, I've heard your name, in the circle of political friends, and I knew you were running several months ago. But this summer, I kind of just disconnected from everybody and did my own thing and went to the beach and refinished furniture and did projects at home, all that. So I met you for the first time just this week.
That's right.
So I'm very happy to have you on my show. You're actually the first candidate to be on the show this season.
Well, I'm honored to be the first. Thank you.
So you came to Merrimack. The Merrimack Town Republican Committee brought you in, and we had a good-sized crowd. I actually have a photo of it. I took a picture from the back of the room. If you want to peek at the monitor, there you could see.
Yes.
And there you are talking. Now you're sitting in the front seat. What impressed me, if Justin wants to bring up the next picture, is, when someone asked you a question, you sat right down next to the person to talk to them, instead of standing there, you know, like on a stage. So I liked that connection, and that impressed me.
Right. Well, that was something that I learned in the military from a very early age. You know, I went in the military as a private and made it to non-commissioned officer, sergeant, before I became a lieutenant. And that kind of connection with your people was something that was hugely important to me. And listening is a skill set.
For politicians as well.
Yeah, and
I
you
do a
need
lot
to
of
develop
listening.
that all the time. And so to do that, you got to get right there and be with the folks that are asking you the questions that you want to represent, that you want to serve. And so I find that to be a very, very good way of responding to people, and it's very important.
So I picked up your piece of your literature, and I want to talk more about the Army and your career and all that. But first, the first thing that caught my eye when I looked on the back, I see a Norwich cadet.
Yes.
My son just graduated from Norwich, and he's a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force.
Oh, outstanding.
So when did
Great.
your son, is that your son?
2012, that's my oldest boy. He graduated from Norwich. My brother graduated in 1991. He's a colonel in the Army, serves in Washington, D.C. And we have a cousin and his son as well that graduated from Norwich University. So we have quite a legacy at Norwich University in our family. And
also, the clerk of the New Hampshire State House, Paul Smith, he is also a Norwich graduate.
I have met so many Norwich graduates not only in my career in the military, but also just being back in a short period of time and working with veterans that graduated from Norwich University. And I have a very close friend, Larry Costa, who sits on the board there. We served together in 10th Special Forces Group. So it's a very small world, and it's interesting how you get connected.
It's kind of a small school too, but on my street, my son went to Norwich. The boy next door is a senior at Norwich, and the man across the street is a Norwich graduate. So we have this little triangle. So I went over and talked to his children. I said, you don't have a choice. One of you is going to go to Norwich. We have to continue this.
That's right. And you know, the network of graduates, alumni, that's what makes those kind of programs very strong, right?
And the other question I had, just on looking at your literature, is this is such a beautiful picture of obviously it's New Hampshire.
It's in the Lakes region, right?
I
where
thought the Lakes
where I'm
region
from.
Where,
yeah.
where is it?
It's right off of Lake Winnipesaukee, not too far from Route 3 as you go into Laconia.
And okay. So who took the picture?
I'm not sure. I did not take the picture, but I approved the picture because it was beautiful.
Too. I love the picture. So thank you, Justin, for zooming in. And then I also wanted to tell you, my father was a Marine, but before he was a Marine, he was in Patton's Third Army. He helped liberate Dachau. Mm-hmm. And of course, he was haunted by the whole experience.
Sure he was.
Once he got out of World War II ended, he joined the Marines, and then he never spoke of the Army again. Mm-hmm. Sorry. But I know I talked to you Monday, and I asked you if you've ever been to the Patton Museum in the desert of Southern California. And
yes.
You said you had.
I have.
Well, I got this book there, and this is one of my favorite books I've ever read.
Right.
If I had to list 7 of them, this is on the list of 7 favorite books.
Yes, it's a very good book, and of course
you read it?
there's been a tremendous amount of writing about the Pattons, and in particular George Patton, and of course, if you are in particular a military person, it's one of the personalities that you studied, right? And so. He's a military leader that's revered, a West Pointer, and his image in a statue is there at West Point for everybody to see, and so there are definitely some outstanding leadership lessons to take from him. He said a lot of things, a lot of quotes that have been pulled out, but one of the things that popped into my head shortly after we invaded Afghanistan and began our initial rotation there was the way to be most effective was to be surrounded by the enemy and surrounded by the populace in that kind of environment. And that's kind of a Patton-esque and also Chesty Puller from the U.S. Marine Corps kind of quote, right? Because George Patton would say, hey, grab him by the nose and kick him in the butt, right? And he used other words.
Yeah, he had some colorful language. Yeah.
That's right. And Chesty Puller would say, hey, we got the enemy right where we want them, we're surrounded, right? And so a combination of reading and studying both those personalities and leadership techniques kind of came up with, hey, this is the type of environment that we're in, and we got to figure out how to be most effective being surrounded by our enemy and the populace, and in some cases they were one and the same. So, you learn a lot.
You led one of the first groups in Afghanistan after 9/11, riding on horseback to take control of the southern Afghan region from the Taliban.
Yes.
Are you haunted by that? Because being in combat, a lot of people come back with nightmares.
Yeah, I would say that I'm not so much haunted, but I am very much affected not only by that rotation, but the 10 rotations that I spent in Afghanistan.
You did 10 tours?
66 months total in Afghanistan over a 10 rotation period. And from 2001 to the middle of 2013, there was only 3 years that I was not in Afghanistan, and that was 2003 and 4. And 2008. 2003 and 4, I was in the Pentagon on assignments. And 2008, I was in the U.S. Army War College.
What year were you in Pentagon? 2008?
2003. Well, I was there from 2003 to 2005 over 2 different assignments.
Did you know Lieutenant Colonel John Nodder? Uncle John.
Uncle John for you?
Yeah.
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
I can't remember which year he was at the Pentagon.
Yeah, I was there. I did 3 assignments in the Pentagon. That was my first assignment. I started out right after the first rotation, came home in 2000, was there 2001 to 2002, came back, and found myself being nominated for and being chosen to be the aide to the Secretary of the Army. I did that for a year, working for Secretary Tom White, and what a wonderful experience. Talk about a great leader. He made it to a general officer, a West Point grad, treated me like I was, his son, for crying out loud. It was I learned a lot from that man about leadership and how to treat people. And then I worked on the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations right after that for my second assignment before taking my battalion command. So very, very interesting assignments that kind of led to my education and how to operate at the national level, the international level, and understand how Washington, D.C. works, understand how it works in relationship to, to other countries, and learning about policy and strategy and the importance of, everything we do, not only to support our military, but also to support our entire government.
Right.
So
I want to thank you for your service. And I
welcome.
also wanted to ask you about your coin. I think it was Representative J.P. Marzullo gave you that coin. I do have a picture of it. Justin will bring it up. Well, I took a picture of it.
That's right,
There
you
it
did.
is.
There it is. That's right.
Georgie.
So JP did not give it to me. Bob and Barbara Healy
that's
gave
right.
it to
Of
me.
Merrimack, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barb.
And they're great. I love them both. Hugely supportive and very good to Sharon and I. And he gave this to me with a challenge to win. Mm-hmm. And so I'm carrying this coin with me everywhere I go.
You want to know why
as a reminder
why I said
to win.
JP? Because JP gave me a challenge
Right.
coin.
Okay.
I don't have it with me, so if you put
probably-
that down, does that mean I have to buy you a beer? Because I don't have
No, don't worry
It's
about
on
it.
my
I'm
desk.
not going to coin you. I just brought this here because I thought it might come up in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's. I think
I like it.
you know
Very
Bob,
impressive.
Bob and Barb got it from George Patton's grandson when they were
Who's not in the
supporting
military?
Mario Rubio's campaign.
Oh, okay.
And they went to a speaker series. He was, Patton's grandson was the one talking, and they ended up with a coin. So for them to give this to me, as much as it meant to them to give this to me, means a tremendous amount to me. And
They must really believe in you, or they wouldn't give you the coin.
that's exactly right, and that's really what that means. It's
Well,
very,
I'm-
I'm very honored by it.
I'm sure there's got to be more reasons other than the military that they're supporting you. So let's talk about the issues now.
Sure.
Because I know you've been going around the state and
Mm-hmm.
having meetings and meeting the voters. And what are they asking you? What are their number one concern?
So I think number one concerns are, basically around the Constitution and the Democrat socialist agenda that endangers the American way of life, right? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, what that agenda is going to do and the negative effects that it will have on New Hampshire and on America. When you just look at trying to the idea of stripping the verbiage of the Electoral College out of our Constitution, the actual changing of our Constitution.
They sent us a book in the mail this thick. I'm going to shoot mine. It's going to be target practice for me.
Yeah.
But it's the case to get rid of the Electoral College.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you explain that to people?
There's-
Do you really want California and New York and Texas to be the three states that decide who's going to be the president?
Right.
And the
Well-
rest of the states won't matter.
In New Hampshire, it's not a hard sell. You lose your significance as the first primary state, right? Your New Hampshire advantage becomes significantly, damaged by that. The fact that anyone today could think that changing the Constitution is something that should be done is another very dangerous thing. The hubris in that is very, very scary. Our Constitution, by the way, we now have the longest standing government in the world, right? And we're a young country at 243 years old. But all other countries' governments have changed over time. Ours has not, and it's been the longest standing, and it's because of our Constitution. And to try and even think that you're smarter than our founding fathers that put this together with the stipulation to protect the minority from the majority, right? So basically what they're doing is they're subscribing to democratic principles that would actually undermine our republic. And that's why we have the Constitution, to protect the republic, right? We subscribe to democratic principles. Of course we do. We love democratic principles. However, we are a republic above and beyond anything else. And that's what the Electoral College really protects, is small rural states that are not going to have large population from being bullied by larger states with larger populations to dictate who will run this country. And it's a very dangerous thing.
It's time for a pop quiz. Do you know who was the last person to sign the Declaration of Independence?
Do I? I'm sorry.
Well,
I
he's
don't.
buried 2 miles from where we're sitting, right down the street. So when you leave Town Hall today,
I
you're
will
gonna
go
make a
straight
right.
there
You're
and
gonna
get an education.
go right across the street from the common man, you'll find the grave of Matthew Thornton.
Matthew Thornton.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, he
Well,
had
I do
gout.
know who he is, but I didn't, you know.
He was the last one. And he had
Yeah.
gout, so he had to prop that foot up and make that long journey to go sign it.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, you know, like I said, in this election, everywhere I go, I always learn something new, and I always get something else to consider. So thanks for that.
So you're welcome. Of course, I run for office too, and one of the things that I always run on is Second Amendment rights. So I know that people in Merrimack are going to be concerned about that and where you stand on the Second Amendment.
Well, I'm a full supporter of the Second Amendment, and I fully supported what the governor did with his veto. So rest assured, New Hampshire, you have no worries with me on the Second Amendment.
Okay,
I
that was
am
a
a
question that
staunch supporter.
I saw on Facebook. Somebody made a comment. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna. I always ask all the candidates that anyway.
Right. So, you know, don't worry. 33 plus years of active duty service in the military. I raised my hand to support and defend the Constitution. Second Amendment is a right in that Constitution that should never, ever be watered down or messed with. That is something that's hugely important, and I've seen it play out in other countries. Other countries that have tried to disarm their populace. I saw it in Afghanistan, and I saw the devastating effects it had on a policy to disarm the rural villages because somebody thought that that would be a good idea. We recommended against it, and when I say we, me and my special operations teams on the ground said, the bad idea. You're going to leave them defenseless against the enemy, the Taliban. And that's exactly what happened.
I know, and how hard is that to understand? You
And
take
they
the
came
guns
in.
away from the people. They have no way to defend themselves against
Right.
tyranny.
I'm not saying that America and Afghanistan are the same types of situation, but what I am saying is that you can draw a lesson, can be learned, from a populace that isn't able to defend itself from tyranny, right, or from its enemies. And we've seen that time and time again. And another lesson to be drawn historically for Afghanistan is they defeated Alexander the Great, the British, and the Soviets, right? They defeated them because the populace was armed and was able to fight back.
Right. Now, the Soviet Union, I remember reading an article about that, how they went into Afghanistan, and Afghanistan has always defeated all their enemies. And I was thinking, yeah, but this is the Soviet Union. But they did beat them.
They did. And of course, you know, we supplied them with arms that gave them an additional capability to deal with the Russian air threat. But that wasn't the deciding factor. The deciding factor was on the ground.
Yeah, the Soviets went in and paved their roads, and then they used those roads to drive their tanks in. Yeah, and they still won.
They still won. They still won.
I'm just curious because I'm also a social conservative. Are the people of New Hampshire asking you questions on social issues?
Well, I get asked about
Because I just have this
opioid
one time-
crisis,
oh, yeah.
mental health
Okay.
crisis. I get asked about those things on the campaign trail. You know, I'm a huge mental health advocate. I'm a huge advocate in the opioid crisis. I think the way that Jeanne Shaheen is approaching it by throwing money at it and
That's usually a Democrat solution to all
Right,
problems. Just
right.
throw more money at it.
instead of focusing that money on what our recovery experts are telling us to do, and that is on prevention and on recovery, we've done little to stem the problem of opioid crisis right here in New Hampshire and across the United States. Also, their border policies, the southern border, are very, very dangerous for New Hampshire and for America. 95% of that fentanyl and those drugs get into our country from that border. We know it.
So
Weak
if we
border laws.
secure the border.
That's right.
We can stop the drugs coming in.
We can at least put a big dent in it coming in, right? And of course, if we have the right laws and the right policies, then we can beat it inside the interior of our country as well. As long as we do one thing, the federal government allows the states and our local communities to have the resources to put the programs together that are going to defeat it, instead of trying to run it from Washington, D.C. like we're doing now.
Are you familiar with the programs in New Jersey? Because I remember when Chris Christie was running for president, we had talked about that. When somebody gets caught with drugs, they immediately get put into treatment,
right,
instead of jail.
Rhode Island has the same construct, and I think that's a great construct, right? Instead of putting them in jail in a population where they're still going to have access to drugs and they're not going to deal with their drug population, which is another problem that needs to be fixed, but you put them into treatment and recovery treatment, and then you give them job skills, and then you integrate them back into their communities where they have a job, they're not on drugs, and you continue to support them by linking them up with somebody who has gone through recovery and has been successful in recovery, and then they have that, that additional person to help them out, I think is the way to go. And New Jersey does it, Rhode Island does it, Washington State is doing it, and there's a model out there that's more effective than the harm reduction model of medically assisted treatment, syringe and needle exchange, and allowing people to do drugs in parks. And that's just a bad thing.
They are doing drugs in parks. And, since we implemented the needle exchange, they're getting their needles free, and they're finding more needles thrown all over the place. Because before they would save their needles and reuse them, but then, of course, they get infections. But
now they discard them right where they use it. And, of course, that's a hazard for the community. Right. That's a hazard for children. That's a hazard for our pets. And it's not going to solve the problem. But that's where they're focusing their energy. And that's what I hear from people. And that's what I hear when I go talk to the recovery centers, when I talk to people. Every single level of our society is affected by the opioid crisis. There is no place that you can go and find refuge from it. So we have to solve it in a way we're solving now. Plus, taking money from Big Pharma isn't going to solve it either, right?
True.
Regardless of how you take it, through PACs or directly. A half-truth is a half-truth, right? It's half a lie, too. You can't tell me that, I don't directly take the money because it comes through a PAC. Wrong answer. If it ends up in your coffers, you got to be more vigilant, more dedicated, if you're going to blame them for the problem, which is who she blames. Notice she doesn't blame herself, right? And she was there from 96, when OxyContin came into this state, to 2003. She was senator, ran for Senate in 2007. She's been there. It's 2019. They claim a 5-point percentage drop in deaths in this state, but I attribute that to Narcan and not to any successful recovery program.
Yeah, Narcan
right?
is a whole other story.
Right. I mean, talk to our first responders about it.
Oh, I have.
And you do. I know. You have probably more in-depth knowledge about it than I do, but I know there's a problem. I also know that there's a way to deal with it more effectively, and we're not doing it, and that's why we need change.
So if you go to Congress, I presume that's one of the committees you want to be on. What
yes.
other committees?
So I'd like to be on the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Kelly Ayotte was.
Yep, I would like to be. I think my whole military career was a apprenticeship for serving effectively on the Senate Armed Services Committee in the U.S. Senate, right? I mean, I went from private to general. I've done the national thing, the international thing. I've sat down with heads of state. I've sat down with presidents, with chiefs of defense, you name it. I've written policy for the president. I've written policy for the Secretary of Defense. I've worked the interagency frontwards and backwards in Washington, D.C. I know Washington, D.C., and I know how to get things done there. Foreign Relations Committee would be another committee I would like to be on, and then the Veterans Committee. Of course, I'm a veteran. I've been working on, helping veterans both here in this state, New England, and nationwide. I sit on 8 boards for 8 different veteran organizations. I donate all my time for that. I don't take a dime for anything that has to do with veteran issues, causes, support for them and their families. And I get my care through the VA. And so I think I know, not only from being a service member, but now from being a veteran for 2 years, the gaps in the system and how the bureaucracy needs to be fixed in Washington, D.C. to make it more responsive to our veterans down inside the communities. And that's what I want to work on.
And we have just a minute left, so I'm going to give you the last minute to look right into the camera and talk to the people of Merrimack and tell them why they should vote for you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Look at that camera.
My name is Don Bolduc. I'm also referred to as General Don Bolduc. So when you get a call and you ask if you know Don Bolduc, please know that General Bolduc and Don Bolduc are one and the same. We need a change in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has ineffective leadership. That ineffective leadership, I believe, is personified in Jeanne Shaheen. And we need a change. She's asking for a third term I do not think she has earned. I will bring personal responsibility, servant leadership, and accountability back to Washington, D.C. I will serve you in the same way that I served the men and women under my command in the U.S. military for all the years that I served. And you will be my priority. I'm not going down there to get rich. I'm not going down there to get my family rich. I'm not going down there for anything else. So your vote is very, very important. Go to www.donbolduc.com. I think you'll like what you see. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you. God bless you.
Strong grip. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.